since Fabian mentioned the story of me almost getting fired, I'll probably have to get to that story, so I'll do that. But maybe let me kick it off with a bit of introduction. So I started my career as a product manager a little bit over 20 years ago, and essentially spent the first 10 years of my life at Nokia, mostly doing product management. Then I went to 6 different scale-ups at Series B to essentially lead product. And I think the one thing that you've learned when you join a startup at Series B as a product leader is that either the product is broken, the team is broken, or both are broken, because there's no other reason to hire me otherwise. Right? So what I'll try to do is give you a short framework that I usually used just after joining in the first couple of months to essentially figure out how we can reignite growth and what we can solve immediately to help the company get back on track. I'll already say the slides are very rich in text for a reason. I wanted them to be practical. If you want a copy of the slides, just message me after the presentation. I'll send you a copy, so no need to take notes. And let's get started. So I'll focus on activation, so onboarding part. It's applicable to the entire funnel. And let's start with this. So this is probably the most important thing any company should answer as they are growing. And none of the companies I joined actually knew who their target customer was. To give you an example from Typeform, when I arrived, I asked, who is our customer? They told me, we don't even know if we're a B2B or B2C company. We have some customers who use us just ahead of wedding to see if someone has an allergy. And then we have these massive hotel companies that send millions of surveys every single month to see satisfaction of their customers. Great example of a problem, because where did they end up? They end up in the situation where they were building features for 1% of their users with a small team. And you can't do that. But if you have a very diverse group of users, you end up in that kind of situation where you're essentially trying to satisfy a very diverse group, and you don't have resources to build everything. But that's not the only problem. The second thing happens. Your UX degrades, because you start building features for consumers and for enterprises and for mid-sized companies. Suddenly, the UI gets more complicated. People come in and they start looking at this and saying, well, I don't know, this is not for me, this is not for me, this is not for me. And it takes a while to figure out what you need to build. And your platform gets complicated, so most likely you're going to end up rewriting it in the future because it's just going to be this very, very complicated technical platform. And essentially, if you look at why this happened, is if you are in the product-led growth, you generally do not go and target specific customers. They arrive to you. In case of Typeform, 33% of customers arrived from virality just clicking on the form. 33% came from referral. But then we had crazy months. For example, one time, Donald Trump decided to use Typeform to collect information from American citizens about why they hate media. And that particular month, I think we had 400,000 or 500,000 people sign up from America thinking that we will give them more information about Donald Trump and probably help them contribute to the campaign. Now, you can guess how many of them converted to be actually our users long term. Exactly 0. But if you don't know who your ICP is, you're in deep trouble, because suddenly you see 500,000 people signing up, no one is converting, no one has any idea why. You're actually, all your metrics are out of whack. Your board is asking you, why is this happening? And you can't even explain, because you don't know that wrong people are signing up. So this is the #1 thing that you need to sort out. And by the way, the story that Fabian alluded to was at the company called Leanplum, where our salespeople decided to sell our platform to Coinbase. And this was at the peak of crypto. Coinbase was probably the hottest brand in the US at that point of time. Also, our board members were investors in Coinbase, so there was personal relation. But Coinbase needed the most secure platform out there because they were storing all of their analytics data with us, which essentially meant we had all the transactions that are happening in cryptocurrency. And we simply couldn't build it. It would take us a year to build everything they needed for a single customer. So I had to go to the board and tell the board that we're going to fire Coinbase. And the board told me they will fire me. But 2 weeks later, thanks to smooth talking from our CEO, they changed their mind. I was back at work, and we were able to separate from Coinbase. And that allowed us to refocus the platform more on the target customers. So how do you do it? Well, usually I look at two things. First of all, I look at, are they getting value from us? So I look at all the customers through a survey and analytics that get a lot of value from us. A good example at Typhoon, they get a lot of survey responses. If you look at Lokalize, they get a lot of translations. It's very simple. Customers always have one or two ways they think about value, and you essentially just try to find the ones that get a lot of value for a longer period of time. And then the second thing is, obviously, will they pay you for that? So can you generate value for them, and can you capture the value? And the combination of two will give you usually a group that I would say somewhere accounts between 25 and 40% of your overall base. And that's your ideal customer profile. Everyone else is a noise in a product-led growth company. The second thing that is really critical if you want to reignite growth is to understand why they buy you and when they buy you. So what you do is you use jobs to be done, switch interviews. It's essentially an interview process that allows you to talk to your customers and understand what is the problem that triggered them to start searching, when they were triggered, what they were looking for, how they are assessing the value, and how they will make a decision. And that allows you to design the entire journey to essentially satisfy their needs and help them find the right information. Next thing. This is very important. I've worked in the product-led sales companies and product-led growth companies. And I've worked in hybrids. And Lokalize is a good hybrid because I can give you an example of how the two differ. The customers who come through our self-service, first of all, they do some translations. Then they do some integrations. Then they invite their entire team. And then they decide to convert. After they've tested the product end-to-end. The customers who come from sales convert. Then a month later, they invite a few users. Then a month later, they do an integration. And then maybe 3 months later, they start getting value from the product. Salespeople can do it because salespeople can drive your motivation. When you just give self-service, there's very little you can do in terms of driving motivation. So if you want your self-service to work, your number one job is to remove friction. So what our job is to make sure that you can integrate with anything, preferably with no engineering, because that's essentially what's going to block you from trying the product. That you can translate anything you need with minimum effort and without any knowledge. And preferably, we can also recommend you who to invite to the platform so you don't have to think about that. And that's essentially what you're trying to do when you're trying to get this model right. So there are 6 types of friction. And it's very important to remember all of them because you ultimately have to address every single one of them. The first one is physical effort. Then we have the time consumption, financial cost, mental effort, social friction, and emotional friction. So let me tell you a little bit before I jump into the details on how we actually address it very quickly. So what we do as an exercise is we do something called dog fooding. I don't know if you know the origin of that. There was an ad in the 70s when a man was eating his dog's food to essentially say the food is so good that even a human could eat it. But essentially from there, I think it was Microsoft that coined the term that essentially dog fooding is testing your own product. And what we do is we test our own product. We have a very dedicated template. It answers the questions on the right. And we meet as the entire group of people who are involved in this. So marketing, sometimes the CEO, product managers, growth managers, designers, engineers. And what I can tell you is that 2 things happen always. First of all, almost no one have tried your onboarding in a very long time. A small PDF, it was a great example. Our product team thought we have 2 steps in onboarding. We had 16. They thought it takes a minute to onboard. It actually took 20 minutes to onboard because everyone added some question at some point of time. Okay, I would like to know what industry you're coming in. I would like to know this. I would like to know that. Maybe we want to verify this. Maybe we want to verify that. We were losing close to 20% of potential customers just in the onboarding journey. Simplified to 2 steps, 20% growth. The second thing that happens is your marketing usually haven't tested your product. So what they are doing is they are marketing something, but it's not your product. And this is what happened at Limplum. That during onboarding, I actually asked people to go and try a couple of use cases that we were marketing. And very quickly, they realized that out of the top 10 use cases we were marketing, 4 were not possible with our product. You simply couldn't do it. The features were not there. But we were marketing them, we were selling them, and the customers were coming in and expecting to use them. And that's essentially the disconnection between marketing and product. And dogfooding is a great alignment exercise, because it not only helps you discover those problems and eliminate them, but it puts everyone on the same page of what the product actually is. So quickly, types of friction. I will not go through this, because I have only 20 minutes, but here are some advice for you, what you can do to remove every type of friction. I'm just very quickly going to give you some examples. This is from Typeform. What is the biggest problem when you're creating a form? Well, you have to create this long survey. You need to add a bunch of questions. Sometimes you don't know which questions to add. So the first thing, obviously, is templates. That was really the first product that we worked on. You would come in, huge portfolio of templates, also great for SEO, but because people look for things like NPS survey, then they find you, then they join the product, and they use the product for this NPS survey. But it saves a lot of time. Then important questions came in, because people build questions in Google Sheets. But eventually, with AI, create with AI. Now, you don't even have to invent the questions. You can just say, hey, I want to measure satisfaction. Tell me how I can do it. Boom. Ready survey. And that small thing can drastically, we're talking about 50% gains, improve your activation and conversion. Second thing, financial cost, social friction, and routine disruption. I'll cover them in a little bit more detail because I think they are very important. So most people, especially most companies, when they say they cannot afford your product, what they're really saying is your product is not worth the money. So you always have to think about it two ways. If someone says it's too expensive, $1,000 is not too expensive for almost any kind of company. They just don't see the value. So what you need to do is show them the value, but also make the model freemium, so they can try with as little friction as possible. And then if they like it, they build a habit, they stay, and they continue paying. Second thing is social friction. And this is an important thing, because you don't want to be the person who advertises the wrong platform inside your company and then has a stigma of making the bad decision and being the one responsible that you're using for this product that doesn't work. So what you really want to do is you want to show to people that they aspire to be like, also use this. And obviously testimonial, communities, and other things can help. And then finally, routine disruption. Nobody likes to learn. That's number one. And nobody likes to change their routines. When I started learning to do a little bit of product design, Adobe Photoshop was the #1 product. And I read 2 books. Each of them was 1,200 pages. I think it took me half a year to read them. And that was the standard for what a good design software was. Now, if I ask my designers whether they would be willing to even look at Illustrator or Photoshop, they just laugh at me. So, well, I have a Figma. It takes me a day to learn Figma. After a day, I also have all these benefits of auto-creation. Why would I ever spend time figuring out UI that requires a 1,000-page long book to figure out? And essentially, what you need to do is you need to make sure that the product minimizes the disruption to the routine so people can very quickly switch to your new thing. So I was talking about finances. And this is an example actually from our Lokalize product that we will be shipping in a few weeks and is right now in beta test. One of the key reasons why people don't localize their product is because they don't know the ROI. But if you tell me who your users are and where they are, I can tell you your ROI, because there are essentially 2 things that will happen with localization. You're going to be found in different languages, and I can, based on Google Trends, tell you how many people search in other languages than English or whatever is your platform in. And I can tell you how many people on your platform have default browser set to a different language than English, so I can tell you who will actually benefit from higher engagement and higher spend. And a simple thing like that completely changes perspective for people who never localize, because very quickly they can look at this and say, okay, it looks like 30 to 40% improvement to sales total. That might be something for us. Or that might be not enough for us to invest into building this whole localization capability. So, talking of that, it's actually an important thing. And I have to say, I am a really bad example for someone who's advocating for localization, because I had no idea about this topic until I went to Small PDF. And we tried to understand why a few of our countries perform so extremely well compared to countries with similar spend, similar GDPs, and so on. And after eliminating everything else, we realized it was the language. that had roughly 20–25% improvement to our conversion rate and retention rate in those countries. We used Lokalize. I ended up coming from small PDF to Lokalize eventually. But the thing is, we forget how much friction there is around English in general. For example, only, I think the most exact accurate thing I could find is about 25% of European companies use English as the first language in the company. So most people in B2B say, well, English, right? We don't need to localize. Actually, you do. 75% of your customers will not be able to use your platform because English is not the language they use every single day in conversations. And if I go back to my native Poland, my mother would never buy anything online in any other language than Polish. But not only my mother, my brother as well. Because even though he speaks good English, he doesn't feel his English is good enough to make difficult decisions in it. And that is a big thing if you're removing friction. OK, a little bit about KPIs. So what I usually track is sign-up rate, time to complete sign-up, and drop-off rate and points. And then for onboarding efficiency, activation rate, so how many % of users actually reach this aha and habit moment, time to first value, and we literally set a goal for our new product, the time to first value to be under 5 minutes. And right now, with our current platform, is close to a day. So we are trying to essentially eliminate that. Early search churn rate. So how many people churn after a month, 2 months, 3 months? And how many customer support requests you're getting. Essentially, these are the key things for friction. And then we use the hard framework for Google, customer effort score, feature usage, set up aha habit, same thing for retention, and onboarding completion as the key metrics. Finally, a little bit for people who really love data. I love building my own models, so I had to include a slide. I often come to companies, and a good example would be Lokalize. And I ask, what is our target? What is our MQL? How do we go after it? And there's a lot of very interesting ideas that are gut feels. So for example, at Lokalize, we said, OK, if someone signs up for a demo, that's really good signal, a lot of points. We will want to have more people like that. Actually, there is zero correlation between signing up for our demo and becoming our customer. But there is a huge correlation between going to our developer and API pages and signing up, because that means engineers actually think about integration, and that's actually a very good signal. And with very simple things, I believe I learned the chi-square test in my economics studies 25 years ago, and all the other three, and it shouldn't take more than a day. You can essentially identify every single signal and every single behavior that tells you whether users will become successful, whether they will be high spenders, and very quickly build entire journey based on those signals. So after you do all of that, what we usually do is map all those ideas and tests to our dogfooding board. Essentially, it's how we decide what we should be testing, what we should be building, what we should be addressing. And we start using game thinking. And for us, game thinking is really, what is the first thing you need to learn? How much pause do we need to give you before we introduce the next bigger thing? How much pause, then the next bigger thing? The idea is to help you discover more and more value with the product, but do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm you. Do it in a way where you have some benefits, you use them, and then you learn again, you see more benefits, and use them. So it's really important to structure this journey, and it's really important to actually UX test it with customers to understand whether you're not sending them too much. Another good example, this time from Typeform, the first onboarding email we were sending, introducing different features, was so good that when it accidentally broke, our conversion rate improved by 9%. So we were essentially sending emails that overwhelmed our users so much that they were quitting, because they were thinking the platform is much harder and they have much more to learn and they didn't want to invest the time. So it's very important to stage it, and really don't think that more is better. More is better at the right time, but more better in the short period, that doesn't work. OK, final thing. So if you talk about game design, the #1 thing you can do for your users is to actually give them feedback on every activity they do. So when I joined Leanplum, people would tell me it takes a year to learn the platform and become a master. We did a small redesign, broke down complex things into smaller pieces, but one thing that we did is we started doing simulations. So what you see on the right side is essentially simulation of what happens if you use a feature called AI optimal time, meaning we will send you an email, push notification at the optimal time for you to open it. This one feature, on average, increased open rates by 40%, conversion rates by 30%, and was used by almost no one. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out why people are not using this feature. And the short answer was, because I don't know what time it will send. And if my boss gets woken up with an SMS in the middle of the night, I get fired. So that was literally the story that was coming from every other customer we talked to. It was like, OK, now we need to give you, A, a prediction of when it will be sent, B, the ability to actually click, enter any user, including your boss, and see where exactly they will get that message, and C, the ability to say, never send a message between 10 p.m. and 6 p.m. if I want to. By the way, not a good idea because people work night shifts. So you're still going to wake up someone if you say don't need delivered during the day. But nevertheless, that one particular thing turned the adoption from roughly 10% to 90% on that platform, just knowing what the outcome will be. So that's it from me. I think I've run out of time as well. So thank you, everyone. And I think James is next.